All right, so now let's think about the relationship between some religious doctrines, intelligent design, and evolutionary theory as a part of the sciences. It's one of the big questions that we humans face today, the extent to which religious views and scientific views are compatible. Can they both be true, or do religious views and scientific views rule out one another so that only one of the two options could be true? So one important move by intelligent design theorists is to argue for a compatibility view. And one of the major religious tenets that's often used in this project is the claim that God created humans in the image of God. The thought then is that this religious doctrine can be compatible with scientific views if intelligent design counts as a scientific theory, because intelligent design could potentially explain how a God would develop or create humans in God's own image, using the methods of natural selection as part, and using divine intervention, tweaking the process as it goes along as another part. One of the nice features of intelligent design is that it provides, or at least has the potential to provide, a reconciliation between science and religious doctrines. Now, let's think for a moment about whether this is right. Is it a genuine scientific theory that the process of evolution could have been guided in the way that is posited by those who want to advocate this kind of connection between religious doctrines on the one hand and scientific views on the other? Well, there's good reason to think that, according to evolutionary theory, the process of development is a random process, not a guided process. And one example from the history of anthropology, I think, does a good job of illustrating the sense in which the process of development explained by evolutionary theory is a random process, and it's assumed to be part of the theory of evolution that the process is random and not guided. If that's the case, then that pokes a hole in the potential reconciliation between the specifically religious doctrine that God created us in God's own image and the scientific view of life on Earth developing in a certain way. And the particular example from anthropology is the debate between the multi-regional theorists and the out-of-Africa theorists that occurred in the mid-20th century. The out-of-Africa view is that Homo sapiens, which are just one kind of hominid, one kind of ape that stands on two legs and has various features that are commonly associated with humans. The out-of-Africa hypothesis says that Homo sapiens evolved in Africa and then spread throughout the rest of the world in potentially multiple different migrations, but that Homo sapiens evolved only once, and then all of the humans, Homo sapiens on Earth, are related through that migration of those Homo sapiens from Africa to the rest of the world. Okay, so that's the out-of-Africa hypothesis. The multi-regional hypothesis, on the other hand, says that Homo sapiens evolved independently in multiple different locations on Earth from earlier species. So there, what you would have to have in the multi-regional hypothesis is multiple different evolutionary processes following exactly the same course, or at least ending up at exactly the same endpoint, namely starting off with earlier ancestors and evolving into Homo sapiens in a parallel way, so that evolution, that change, that development happens in parallel in multiple different parts of the Earth. Well, the debate between the multi-regional hypothesis, Homo sapiens developed or evolved in multiple different places simultaneously, and the out of Africa hypothesis, Homo sapiens evolved in Africa and then spread throughout the rest of the earth, that debate was ultimately resolved in favor of the out of Africa hypothesis. And the reasoning by scientists, by evolutionary theorists, by biologists, by anthropologists that led to the superiority or the victory of the out of Africa hypothesis over the multi-regional hypothesis went like this. The multi-regional hypothesis requires a deeply improbable parallel evolution according to random events that somehow end up at the same outpoint, namely the evolution of a Homo sapien, in different cases in parallel. And the problem is that that's deeply implausible, and the odds against it are very, very high. The out of Africa hypothesis doesn't make any kind of claim about parallel evolution where a purely random process ends up somehow resulting in exactly the same kind of entity at the end of the day in different places. So the point or importance of this part of the history of science and anthropology, the significance for thinking about intelligent design, is that biologists and evolutionary theorists take evolutionary theory to be to posit a purely random process. The process of mutation and natural selection is a purely random process. And if that's the case, then saying that the process was guided by an intelligent designer changes that theory. It's not just some addition to the theory, it's actually incompatible with the way evolutionary theory is properly understood as appealing to a purely random process of natural selection based on mutations.